Hey guys, I'm back with another video. No, your eyes are not deceiving you. This is a Hinderer XM-18. I know I've been talking a lot about my fire tack, and it just kind of sparked something for me to try another XM. Definitely wanted to try the non-flipper. Noticed that they were becoming fewer and fewer. Heard Rick say they were short run. So yes, even though this is before Blade Show, if I didn't say that, this is the Tuesday before Blade Show. So yes, I went and bought a knife before I was going to Blade Show. Crazy, I know. But anyway, picked it up at a place called Southern Edges. I'll put a link below. They've got Instagram, they've got a website as well. Go check them out. So I ended up picking up this non-flipper, brand new. Another thing that I say I try to stay away from is buying a new Hinderer, Emerson, or CRK. A lot of money to be saved, but I also say unless it's a special edition, limited edition, or something of that nature, which it sounds like, at least for now, and I could be proven wrong by the time I jump back into this video after Blade, but at least for the time being, Rick has put out there that this is a small run of non-flippers. And at least initial impressions, night and day difference. Much more prefer this than the 3 or 4 Hinderer XM-18 flippers I had before this. Anyway, so I got this knife. As you can see here, has the tri-way pivot system. You can see all of the washers there. The plastic bag, the sticker, the peanuts. I didn't get a Sean Lemaster's card in this one. Not too concerned about it, but don't know why. Anyhow, I got in the car and started flipping this knife. And well, in the store I flipped it. The action is just as poppy and smooth as Rick shows in his video. It closes without any wrist. Just the blade itself closes the knife. So if that's your thing, you know, the bearings definitely do provide a very smooth action. Now, the one thing that I noticed after flipping this for about 20 or 30 minutes, I noticed that I heard a rub. And when I heard the rub, the blade was off center. And I have doctored this a little bit in the meantime, because this knife is exactly 1 day old. Yeah, just about 1 day old. I picked it up about 4 o'clock on Monday, and right now it's 4:30 on Tuesday. So sure enough, what happened was the pivot had loosened up. And if you guys look, I don't have long fingernails, but if I stick my thumbnail in here, and this is exactly what I did in the car, I can turn this pivot no problem. So that affects the centering. Now you can see it's a little bit more to the left as it's shown here. Than it was before. So definitely need some Loctite in there. I didn't check that before I left the shop. Is what it is. I'm not too worried about it, but it did rub. I also noticed after that, I wiggled the blade a little bit, and there's just a hair, just a hair of side to side blade play. So those are the first two things that I noticed. Well, the first few things I noticed was that this non-flipper makes it a much better knife for me personally. The bearings are very smooth. It flips open. The detent is very nice. There's a little bit of side blade play. I am going to take this apart. And that's why I'm not going to do a full video now. I'm going to take this apart, put it on Teflon, carry it to blade, carry it for a little bit, and then I'm going to get back to you guys on this video. And I also, this is the spear point grind. I have not had a slicer grind, but it wouldn't have hurt me if it was a little bit thinner behind the edge. Now, with the thicker grind, that means there's going to be a little bit more meat here, for lack of a better term, to support that edge. So I'll get back with you guys, let you know what I'm thinking after Blade. Good knife overall, not thinking about getting rid of it at all. So I'll check back in with you. And yes, I'm gonna carry this tip down just to try it out. Might as well try all new things. Even got a new color, red. One thing I forgot to show you guys is, let's see if I can get it to focus here. The blade does have some play in the blade well from side to side. None up and down, but it does have some from side to side. Like I said, that action is pretty smooth. Drop shut. But I'm going to be swapping these bearings out for the Teflon washers. All right, guys, I'm back from Blade, and the first thing I'm going to do is roll in some still photos to show you guys the knife when I took it apart. This first picture I'm showing you guys is just the knife disassembled, what it took for me to disassemble it, what I used to disassemble it, and it shows you kind of the parts. The next picture is a picture of the pivot, the pocket that's been milled into the pivot, or the pivot, the tang area of the blade rather. The other side shows you the detent tracks on the blade itself. Now I'm going to roll in a picture of the male screw to the pivot, and you can see that there is no Loctite on this screw, and that's what was causing me the issues with the blade becoming off-centered after use. And then you can see the female side of the pivot there, and you can see the wear or lack thereof on the female side of the pivot. You can see that the knife was dry when it was assembled, so I left it dry, which has worked out very well, which is what I'll jump into next when we get back into the knife itself, which we'll do now. Well, I'm clearly back from Blade. You guys have seen the disassembled knife, and I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the disassembly and the reassembly first, and then we'll move on and talk about some other points. So, disassembling the knife, you obviously have to have this spanner bit. Because my pivot was loose and it did not have any Loctite, I was able to disassemble the knife without that tool. I also was able to reassemble it without that tool because it did not take that much tension on the pivot to center the blade and get rid of all of the blade play in the open position. So if you muscle some play, there's like a minute amount of play. However, with those bearings in there, and I think I mentioned this already, there was a noticeable amount of play, even with the blade centered and everything like that. So that was the first thing I noticed about the disassembly and then the reassembly. The other thing is these, and I'm sure if you have seen a Hinderer before or you're familiar with Hinderers, you know this, but these standoffs here slip over these screws. So that took a little bit of finagling to get everything situated. It was a little bit more involved because there are more pieces. Everything is precision cut. Everything fit just fine. Everything came back together just as well as it came apart. However, it is a little bit more involved than some knives, and I know that that's a thing for some people as well. Now, let's talk about the action. This is on the Teflon washers now. It's not on the bearings, it's on the Teflon washers. And you can see here, it's very smooth, and the knife will close on its own. Now, my thing is, I don't really love that. It feels a little bit unwieldy for me, in my personal opinion. I know some people like that, but I like to have a little bit more control, so I'll probably switch over to phosphor bronze. I have noticed this as well on my fire tack. Now, the difference between the fire tack and this is with the knife perfectly centered, and it's been that way since I reassembled the knife and put Loctite in the pivot. With the fire, and if I adjust it any at all, it throws the centering off. With the fire tack, I do have a little bit more room for adjustment, so I can adjust some of that out. There's also not the option for phosphor bronze washers in the fire tack knife, so that's one thing. Now, the side-to-side play in the closed position is still there. I think you can hear that. There is no up and down, no detent slop as some people refer to it. I know that's a thing for some people. The lockup, if you guys look, and I've used this, like I said, for the past month, this is July 4th that I'm recording this, you can see that the lockup is decent. All of the steel lock bar insert is on the tang of that blade, and it does hold the lock solid. It does hold the lock up solid. There is no up and down play or anything like that. There is no stick. Let me shut up so you guys can hear that. There's no stick. That was the lock bar hitting the over travel stop. Now, one thing, and I've seen several people discuss this and be concerned about it, if you push this lock bar, it does slip and it does stick once it has slipped over. And you guys can hear that there. So that is a thing if you're concerned about that. The edge finish. Now, if you look at this, you can see this edge, and this is not a stropped edge or a sharpened edge. This is what came to me from the factory, still holding a great edge. That lets me know that Hinderer is taking care of their knives and their blade steel. However, this is a less aggressive finish on this edge, and it really became apparent in things like cutting tape. I had some tape in here that was kind of like Gorilla Tape, very thick industrial strength tape. And the first 2 times I ran over it, it literally just put a mark on it. It didn't cut it. So I had to cut a 3rd and sometimes a 4th time before it would cut through that tape. So that's something that you want to note. That is something that occurred to me. The behind the edge thickness, it is a little bit thicker than I would prefer. Now, I talked to one of my buddies that's more knowledgeable about Hinderer knives. He said they're all about 20 thousandths behind the edge. I said, you know, I'd love to try the slicer grind, and that's how the conversation came up. He said the only difference is the slicer grind maintains at 20 thousandths roughly all the way up to the tip, through the belly and up to the tip. So that is the difference. This is the spear point grind. So it is a middle ground grind as far as Rick refers to it as. This knife did, like I said, it doesn't have a super aggressive tooth to the edge. So I was cutting through a box and it just slipped right out of the box, and I was cutting by the kitchen sink. I've just got one of those contractor grade aluminum sinks, and it smacked the edge of that sink pretty hard. You can see there are no rolls, dents, or dings anywhere on this edge. It does look like there's a little bit of reflection, but there is no dent, ding, or anything like that on the edge. It hit right around here on that belly. And like I said, you can see there, it is very well supported by that behind the edge thickness. So that is one of the trade-offs. And me, I don't want a cardboard destroyer. I know that is something that the community is kind of shifting towards, all these slicey knives. I want a general use knife. I want something that's just as good at cutting zip ties and plastic banding and clamshell packages and doing some light prying into things like clamshell packaging, maybe even opening a can of paint, you know, just general chores that anybody would do on a reasonable day. And this is the type of knife that will do that, and that behind the edge thickness supports that. You'd lose some of your slicing, but like I said, I opened up several different boxes. It wasn't an issue for me. I don't break down 10, 15, 20 boxes at a time. So for me and for my use and anybody looking for a general use knife, this is a very good example of a general use. The jimping and the ergos. This knife, I didn't have any major glaring issues with the jimping or the ergonomics. The one thing that did happen to me when using this knife is that you can see I like to choke up on a knife, and I've got extra large hands, 4 inches from this side of my palm to the other side of my palm, and I always choke up on a knife that has a choil. And you can see I don't have very fat fingers, but even with my relatively thin fingers, I am close to the heel of that blade, and I did cut myself once. Now, honestly, I was being a little neglectful with the knife, so I'll put that more on me than the knife. However, if you are going to use this knife and you are going to be a little bit aggressive or careless, there is a good chance that you will cut yourself on the heel of that edge. And like I said, you can see there again in another grip. Now, the one thing that really made this shine for me above the flipper, and I've had probably 4 or 5 flippers, is that when I grab this knife, like I said, I like to choke up. You can see my fingers are together. There's no space in between my index finger and my middle finger. And that really helped me with this knife get a better feel when I'm holding the knife. And I don't know why, but there's just something about having those fingers spread apart. I just feel a little bit less in control and connected to the knife. That's just me personally. Your mileage may vary. The jimping on the knife, a lot of people talk about, you know, there's jimping here on the back, there's jimping on the spine of the blade, there's jimping on the butt of the knife, there's jimping on the underside of the knife, there's jimping everywhere on this knife because this is meant to be a work knife. Now, for me, I did not notice any issues with that jimping, but you can see if I put my thumb up here on the spine of this blade, which, you know, a lot of times if you're doing a pressure cut into some cardboard or some heavy material, you're going to be more like this anyway. I didn't notice any issues with that, and I'll be honest with you, having this clip tipped down really made that clip disappear. It was fine to me. The one thing I will say, and Vinny Nero Knives talks about, the back of this is very, the back here is very sculpted, and that really is comfortable and ergonomic to fit the palm of your hand. However, with it being a little bit thinner here, and it does flare out, but with it being a little bit thinner than say an S&G, which I will be comparing this knife to, it makes me wish that I had a little bit more to fill my hand out with. Now, I will say that it feels a little bit thin in the back. Let's see. I think I covered everything in regards to the knife itself. It's a good overall general use knife. Like I said, if you're looking for something that is more of a cardboard destroyer, this is not it. However, I don't think you'd be looking at a knife like this if that's your thing. As far as my thoughts on this knife, my opinion on this knife, it's comfortable in hand. It works, it functions. I like it better than any flipper that I've had. And if I mentioned it or not, I don't remember. But I've had 3 or 4 flippers, never liked any of them. The D10 is good, it's solid. You might be able to hear it click back and forth, but it doesn't come out or anything like that. Anything that I'm worried about. I know that a lot of people are a lot more concerned about that than I am. I've only ever had one knife open in my pocket, and that was my fault. It was an Emerson Commander that I partially pulled out of my pocket and didn't realize I didn't push it back in, close the blade back when I did that, and it got me right here in between these 2 fingers, and trust me, it got me pretty good. So D10's good, it's solid. I think you guys can hear that. Let's see if you can hear it on the close as well. You can hear it sucks it in pretty decently. Ergonomics are good. The edges held up well as far as the wear resistance. It held up well to smacking into the sink. Don't have any complaints there. It is a little bit more complex to put back together. The lock does slip, and it does stick when it does slip, but it does not do that unless you're really squeezing the lock or you purposely push it in. So that's really not an issue for me. The heel of the blade will cut you if you're not careful up on that choil. Overall, like I said, I don't really have any complaints, but it's a knife that just leaves me kind of neutral. The way I explained it to somebody is I put the S&G back in my pocket and it just felt familiar. And the instant analogy that came to my mind was, it's like borrowing your friend's car. You constantly are looking for, well, where are the lights at? Where are the windshield wipers at? Where's this? Where's that? Man, the gear shift. That's how I felt carrying this knife. I felt a little bit out of place. I felt like I was kind of learning the knife as I went along. But when I grabbed that Strider back, that S&G back, it just, I don't know. There's just something about it. If I had to choose between the 2, I probably would go S&G over the Hinderer, but this video is about the Hinderer, and like I said, I will be comparing the 2 directly, so you guys can kind of see where I'm coming from and you can kind of form your own opinion. But the knife overall, it's a good knife, solid. Like I said, I'm just kind of neutral on it. You can change the scales, the hardware, all that stuff, so there is that. But overall, it's a good, solid knife. I don't regret the purchase, but it's not something that I'm like super excited about. So those are my thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed watching the video. I know this was a little bit of a longer video, but I wanted to be able to give you guys more of a user's perspective after kind of that whole bailout situation. So hope you guys enjoyed. Remember, a lazy man carries a dull knife.